course that we're in is the Gospel of Mark, and we have already completed Lesson 1, the authority of Jesus. This is now Lesson 2, the oppositions of Jesus begins. Jesus heals a paralytic. And for this study, we're going to read Mark 2, 1 through 12. And again he entered into Capernaum after some days, and it was noised that he was in the house. And straightway many were gathered together, insomuch that there was no room to receive them, no, not so much as about the door. And he preached the word unto them. And they came unto him, bringing him one sick of the palsy, which was born of 4. And when they could not come nigh unto him for the press, they uncovered the roof where he was. And when they had broken it up, they let down the bed wherein the sick of the palsy lay. When Jesus saw their faith, he said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, thy sins be forgiven thee. But there were certain of the scribes sitting there, and reasoning in their hearts, Why doth this man says blasphemy? Who can forgive sins but God only? And immediately, when Jesus perceived in his spirit that they so reasoned within themselves, he said unto them, Why reason ye these things in your hearts? Whether it is easier to say to the sick of the palsy, Thy sins be forgiven thee, or to say, Arise and take up thy bed and walk. But that ye may know that the Son of Man hath power on earth to forgive sins. He said to the sick of the palsy, I say unto thee, Arise and take up thy bed, and go thy way into thy house. And immediately he arose, took up the bed, and went forth before them all, insomuch that they were all amazed, and glorified God, saying, We never saw it in this fashion. As a result of his teaching and miracles, Jesus' popularity grew rapidly. So many wanted to hear him that they filled the house in Capernaum where he was teaching and crowded around it. Just then 5 men arrived, eager to see Jesus too. One of them was paralyzed, and the other 4 carried him on a stretcher. It was impossible for them to get in through the door. So they climbed up on the roof, dug a hole in it, and let the paralytic down through the opening they have created. You can imagine the commotion among the crowd in the house below. When Jesus saw the faith they had demonstrated, he told the lame man that his sins were forgiven. That was probably not what the man had expected, but it is every man's greatest need. The scribes who were present, though, thought Jesus had blasphemed because God alone can forgive sins. Jesus read their minds and asked, Which is it easier to say, Your sins are forgiven, or get up and walk? To prove his ability to forgive sins, something invisible and therefore impossible to verify, he healed the paralytic, who then got up and walked. Jesus proved his power to conquer invisible spiritual problems by overcoming a visible physical problem. The crowd was dumbfounded. They had never seen anything to compare with Jesus. No. Who will reach Jesus? Consider the 5 men as they approached the house in which Jesus was teaching. They had come in order to see him, but their way to Jesus was blocked by a big obstacle, the crowd. Many would have simply turned around and gone back home. Not these men. They were determined, even desperate in their desire to see Jesus. Their procedure, unroofing the roof, was radical, but it worked. Even today, those who want to come to Jesus frequently encounter barriers in their path. The only ones who actually reach him are those who are absolutely determined and who refuse to allow anything to keep them from following him. How determined to be with Jesus are you? Question 1. What did the paralytic and his friend do when they were unable to reach Jesus? A. They gave up and went home. B. They waited for God to open a path through the crowd. C. They offered a financial contribution. D. They took a part of the roof so the paralytic could enter the house through the opening. Answer. Number 2. What did Jesus do for the paralytic before healing him? Answered. He blanked his sins. 3. Who alone can forgive sins? Only blank can forgive sins. 4. How did Jesus prove he has the power to forgive sins? Answer. He blanked the paralyzed man. Thought question. If only God can forgive sins, but Jesus proved that he could forgive sins, what does that prove about the nature of Jesus? So I'm going to go ahead and give you guys a moment to answer the questions. You guys can pause the video and we'll come right back with the answers. For number 1, what did the paralytic and his friends do when they were unable to reach Jesus? The answer is D. They took off part of the roof so the paralytic could enter the house through the opening. Number 2, what did Jesus do for the paralytic before healing him? Answer, he forgave his sins. Number 3, who alone can forgive sins? Answer, only God can forgive sins. 4, how did Jesus prove he has the power to forgive sins? Answer, he healed the paralyzed man. For the thought question, it says, if only God can forgive sins, but Jesus proved that he could forgive sins, what does that prove about the nature of Jesus? It proves that the nature of Jesus is of God.